Hey, what's good? This is your man Wood. Thanks for clicking on another Bite Down Boxing video. Today I'm gonna get into um, last night's the Zone card, just a portion of it. I'm focusing with this one on Claressa Shields' victory. Pretty much just that. And then on the backside of that, I want to get into talking about the 2-minute. Well, the criticisms, the ongoing criticism of Claressa not having, or the lack of there being knockdowns and KOs for Claressa, and maybe looking at some causes on why that is. Maybe it's not really her. So we'll get into that, and then also what else did I have here? So maybe about 3 points on that, and I'll try to keep this one short, but we know how I'm long-winded. But let's get into it. So last night, hopefully you can see the image right there with from Trap, Stephanie Trap, who is one of the main shooters for Claressa Shields. Also, you see her work on a lot of Showtime boxing. A lot of their content is Stephanie Trap, along with Amanda Westcott and a couple others. But anyway, I just wanted to give some credit to the shooter instead of just working with somebody else's content and not giving them credit for it. So yeah, last night I believe that was Shields' 7th fight, but she went into the fight as the WBA and IBF champion, as you can see down there on the scroll. Last night she took on Hannah Rankin from Scotland, who was 5-2 going into the fight. Some of the backstory was that, of course, last night we all thought that we were getting the big showdown in women's boxing, which was Claressa Shields versus Christina Hammer. But due to some undisclosed illness, if you believe, not that you believe, but if you heard that story that news when it was announced that she had to pull out, it just seems a little odd. We don't know what kind of illness this is that would keep an athlete away from the game in the prime of their career. But anyway, that was supposed to happen this weekend. It didn't happen. Things shifted. I had the video out there a couple of weeks ago, or from early October, speaking with Dimitri Salita on them finding a replacement for this fight. And it ended up not only being a replacement in terms of the fighter, but we also had a new location, which was Mulvane, Kansas. There was also a new platform, which was the Zone USA, which is involved with Matchroom Boxing USA, and then the oft-hated Eddie Hearn, no S. So let's jump into it, though. I watched some of the lead up to this fight. Of course, Claressa was, the mind game stuff, the intimidation was kind of fully underway. Some people don't like that. I think that's always been a part of boxing. Male, female, or whatever, hermaphrodite or whatever. It's a part of sports, period. If we can talk that humble stuff and, what's a champion, what's not a champion, humility, restraint, we can talk all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, competition is competition, and it's about beating the opponent. And if that opponent is fragile enough to give you an inch, space in their mind, just because you're talking, I don't know what to tell you. Professional sports, I understand it in high school, maybe even in college. But once we get to, it's a reason why you can't celebrate a touchdown in college football, and you can you can throw the grenade and blow up the whole offensive line in the NFL. You've earned that right. You're a professional. As long as you play within the confines of the rules for your particular sport, hey, it is what it is. But Claressa said she didn't go too hard on Rankin on social media, just kind of checking in with her, once or twice a week, letting her know that, what the outcome was going to be last night. And Rankin had all of the opportunity in the world to prove her wrong. It didn't happen. The fight ended up being 100-90 on all three scorecards from the judges. It was a dominant performance from Shields, I think, but a valiant effort. A good account was made of classical bassoonist and professional boxer Hannah Rankin. I'm not making light of that at all. I think that's very dope that she's able to put in the time in both worlds to be, to play at a high level in the world of musical performance, and then also to I don't know why you would want to do it, but to go over into the world of boxing and compete against elite world-class boxers. That's kind of odd. But, it's part of Hannah's story. And, I was very intrigued going into this fight to see what the matchup would be. More backstory was that Rankin is a sparring partner of Christina Hammer, has been a sparring partner. I think it was also mentioned that she's also spent camp time with Cecilia Breckhus. So she's seen some things. It just was a matter of, could she execute better? It didn't seem like going into it, I couldn't even find footage on Hannah, but going into it, you didn't think that she had the power. She did have the 2 losses already, one being to Alicia Napoleon, who was a fighter that Shields has told me to my face that, offers have been sent to Napoleon, she wouldn't fight her. So going into it, it was very hard to give Rankin, to favor her in the fight. So I was just observing it, But very early on, Claressa came out kind of picking up, collecting data on what Hannah was trying to do. I think very early, one thing that jumped out to me and was an immediate concern was the fact that it seemed like Hannah was very reluctant to step within range and was kind of flicking out that busy jab that was about 8 inches short, maybe 10 inches short. And so I wondered, how long would it take for her to engage, or was she confident in what she was trying to pull off, or how she was going to adjust to fighting on, under the bright lights on the big stage against an opponent like Shields, who has, a wealth of skills and talent. So, first it seemed like Shields tried to, had the guard up and was going to fight very, normal, be defensively responsible, take her time, etc., etc. But I think once she picked up on the reluctance in Rankin, she just moved in and, started attacking where possible. I think in the second round, Shields dropped the hands, get more comfortable to throw shots from different angles and show some style, show some levels. And she closed that second round with the big right hand as Hannah was trying to spin out to her left. And never really, the flow of the fight never really changed over the course of the 10 rounds. Shields was pretty much doing what she wanted to do. She had some nice counters. She had a few stiff left jabs that really didn't rock Hannah, but changed the course of action of whatever she was doing. She pressed, Shields pressed at different times, tried to go for a knockout, tried to inflict some punishment, just dominated the fight. I will say Hannah was game. She fought pretty well, all things considered. She did have a little bit of a size advantage maybe, or a height advantage, but she never was really to take advantage of that in any way and use it to her favor. One thing I think, and you can say I'm being sexist or I don't know what the hell I'm talking about if you want to, but one thing I just think in watching women's boxing for all across the board, it seems like a lot of the female fighters they don't have a lot of head movement, or they keep their head online a little too often for boxing. And not that the reflexes aren't really there to, to stay out of the way of shots. So I thought there was a couple overhand rights that Rankin connected with here and there, or came close to connecting, because T-Rex kind of keeps her head a little too still for too long. So it was a couple of concerns here and there that she could have connected with one of those and maybe tested Shields' chin, which we've seen tested before, and which, you know, fighters' chins are going to get tested in fights. So, and if anybody's tuned in with the live chat or whatnot, you know, I know it's Football Sunday, but I don't have a view of that, so I'm not even in the chat room. I'm on a different program doing this, so I apologize if anybody is saying anything. If you have, or if somebody is viewing and you said something to me, what up, though? But yeah, I just think that's one thing that I noticed in women's boxing, and I think getting squared up too much, you know, focusing on your offense and getting squared up too much, staying in a combination too long and not getting off your work and moving, getting out to the sides and whatnot. I think that's one thing that I just see in boxing, and that's not necessarily just isolated to something I see in Shields or think that I see in Shields. It's other female fighters that I watch, and it just seems like the art of hitting without getting hit still needs to develop a little bit in the women's game. I thought there was one other thing that I noticed with women's boxing, and it's not really a criticism. It's like I said, that's just something that I see. Obviously, when Shields dropped her hands, you know, she was comfortable enough. She tucked behind the left shoulder a little bit at times, you know, as a layer of defense. But you know, obviously, when she put her hands down to her sides, trying to invite Rankin in a little bit, one part of behind that. But also, I think when you're letting your hands down, it's why waste the energy in keeping them up? You know, if you just skilled enough, or, you know, have the athleticism to avoid those shots, you know, why keep your hands up? But obviously, when she did that, you know, she was picking up on what Rankin was trying to do to her and eluding a lot of that. Where am I at on my time? So 12 minutes. So yeah, I just think in the 7th round, Claressa Shields invited Rankin in. You know, come get me on the ropes. Let's mix it up a little bit. Rankin didn't accept that invitation. I thought maybe that was an area where she could have leaned on Claressa a little bit. You know, and maybe tried to change the dynamic of the fight, or at least see if she could be more effective in there. But, you know, she didn't, and I'm sure she had reason for it. You know, she probably thought the uppercut was coming, or that Claressa would counter or whatnot. So she moved back out, chose to keep it more so in the center of the ring, or, you know, utilizing all of the ring. In the 8th round, I saw Claressa started to experiment with different things, trying to set up shots differently, you know, trying to get in the front door differently, different defensive tactics, you know, parrying shots and all of that. She was just showcasing herself. In the 9th round at the bell, Claressa wobbled Rankin, and then, you know, that was at the bell. And then in the 10th round, you know, she tried to step on the gas here and there to try to close the show, but she wasn't successful, as I've already said. You know, the scores ended up being 100-90 on all 3 cards. So that's pretty much the, you know, the recap of the fight. I thought I really appreciated DAZN's, you know, the pre-fight videos that they had of each fighter. Spending a little time with them in the gym and whatnot, getting some of their personality out there, understanding a lot about Hannah Rankin's background, coming from another country, getting an understanding of, you know, what's her motivation in competing in this sport. So I think that was pretty slick. I'm not going to talk about Sugar Ray Leonard with his contribution to the telecast. You know, he's a Hall of Fame guy, one of the earliest sports heroes that I had, one of the best names in all the boxing, Sugar Ray Leonard, just an iconic dude in the game. behind the mic, you know, he is what he is. He was very impressed. I'll say that much. He was very impressed with what T-Rex was doing. The one thing, and this kind of leads into the second part of the video, was just the constant criticism or questioning commentary on the lack of power, or the perceived lack of power, or at least the lack of there being any knockdowns in Claressa's career to this point. No knockouts. And I just think, you know, if you, again, when we're in, and you know, they're on the show, maybe they don't have time to do everything and to tell the full story. I think it was called on, though, maybe there was a mentioning or two of the 2-minute situation in the women's rounds. I know early on Brian Kenny, you know, made a note that, hey, in case you thought that round went quickly, that's because women have 2 minutes. So let's get into it, which brings me to my next point. I thought it was real dope last night. Girl Boxing, at Girl Boxing Now, is an account that I started following. They followed me like last week. They followed Bite Down Boxing on Twitter, and I followed them back. And, you know, they just came out. It's not just me saying it. You know, here's an account. Obviously, I don't know who runs it, but I'm assuming it's a female behind it. And she said, you know, very clearly, women's boxing, hashtag women's boxing needs 3-minute rounds. And I've went up and, you know, back and forth. I've waffled, vacillated on this point myself, trying to, from a mature, you know, sports fan perspective, not just they have to do what the men have to do. But I think if you're going to talk about her or criticize Claressa Shields for the lack of knockdowns, I think we need to take a strong look at this 2-minute limit. And I'll get into some of my other points here, but you know, I think it takes away from the true story of boxing. I think it de-emphasizes one of the major factors in a bout, which is time. You know, we see a lot of it. A couple notes here. You know, pressure over time is how a lot of fights get decided. You know, pressure over the first 6 rounds, pressure over the last 6 rounds, pressure over the middle of a fight. You know, fighters can sense, and trainers, you know, when you're scoping out or scouting the opponent, you know when a kid gets, when an opponent gets tired in the 3rd round, or they gas out in the 4th round, and you can instruct your fighter to you know, to press on the gas here. Or, you know, if you have a more experienced fighter against a youthful fighter, obviously, you know, one of the common goals is to get that younger fighter who probably hasn't done much beyond 6 and 8 rounds. You want to work at a certain level and control things to where you see how strong they are after that 8th round or into the championship rounds. So, but here, with keeping everything at 2 minutes, I just don't think there's time for, you know, for natural boxing action to unfold. And, you know, for fighters, yeah, you can deal with the opponent, you can deal with what they're trying to do, but does the psychological part of boxing come in, and where you question yourself? And then I'd also say another point here is that, you know, there are, even on the men's side, there's very few one-punch fighters in boxing. There's very few one-punch fighters. You might have a guy like Inoue, you know, is a guy who seems to have that, who's demonstrated that. Deontay Wilder coming up December 1st. He's a guy that's definitely demonstrated one-punch power. I mean, it's not a lot of guys knocking guys out with one punch. It's just not happening. So it's kind of unfair, in my opinion, to expect in a sport on the women's side, where especially once they get above these club shows, we just don't see a lot of knockouts in the women's game, period. So why would we sit here and force that expectation onto Claressa Shields or judge her by the fact, whether there's knockdowns or knockouts? One thing here real quick that I did hear on the broadcast is with Claressa and the zone commentary team saying that she wants to be the greatest ever. She wants to be $1 million fighter. Claressa even said in her piece on there that she wants equal pay and TV time, equal TV time. I think along with that equal pay, you might need to have equal work, equal time of work. So that's just one thing to consider. And like I said, it was good to me to see another, someone on from a women's perspective, to see if this account isn't ran by a female, it's at least advocating for women's boxing, and it's just not some male fan that's sitting there, disappointed in the action or bored with the action. It is somebody who has some skin in the game. So that was one of my major points. Getting into the third part is just some different examples in between in the sports world, in the sports world itself. Also from girls boxing, at girls boxing now, was a little more background that is it time for 3-minute rounds for women, especially in New York where it is legal. Elite women box 3-minute rounds, and the amateurs, it is time for pros to box 3-minute rounds as well. And then there's some commentary, some back and forth with Boxing Jones, Mark J. I think I recently followed that account too. But again, it's just girls boxing now, just weighing in on the matter. And I just looked at a couple of different things. I believe in MMA, women's MMA. I believe they fight the same time as the men. I don't watch a lot of MMA, and I didn't feel like wasting time to verify that. But I think when I have watched MMA, a lot of times I have watched the women because I thought it was more technique being used, and I don't recall there being a difference in the time. So it'd be interesting to me, or it's odd to me, that boxing would impose a 2-minute rule, and there wouldn't be the same thing with the difference in the time for females in MMA. Another thing is, where's my note here? Is it possible on one of these telecasts, is it possible to go and show what the data is? Is there some hard data that shows there needs to be a difference? There's a certain impact or damage, amount of damage that can be unnecessary or excessive, from the second minute to the end of the third minute. Is there anything that supports that, which, would validate there being a 2-minute limit? Show us that. Can we talk about that? Let me see that. And I'm just saying that because, in some of the instances where there's a difference in the two, for a different set of rules for males and females, obviously in basketball, the average the average size of a woman's hand is smaller than a male's hand. So I can see why there's a different basketball for women. There's also the WNBA 3-point shot is 22.15 feet versus the men, which is 23.9 feet. There's probably some data in that made them make the decision that we need to have the women's line up here. Women don't shoot the ball as well from that 23.9 range. So if we moved it up here, it's still a test, but it's still a certain proficiency that's going to add to the excitement of the game. So it's a difference there. Tennis, women's tennis being best of 3, I think it still is. I'm assuming at some point in time when that came into play, it might not have been a lot of women involved or something, and it just seemed like a best of 3 delivered a certain quality of the game. Golf, the women's tee is up closer to the pin than men's, the starting point. Again, I think relatively speaking, women are not as strong as men. So how many extra strokes is it going to add on to the women's game if they're hitting from the tees that the men use? But I think it's data behind that. I think it's a reason why you went and made that decision. And then also, I think in some of these other sports that I'm talking about, that I just mentioned, the one thing that's unique about boxing, why I don't see why it couldn't be 3 minutes, is this is actually a woman fighting another woman. This isn't, obviously, this isn't a woman fighting a male. There's nothing changing in this 3 minutes other than, in boxing, there's nothing different. It's woman to woman. So why is there a need for the 60 seconds to not, that last 60 seconds to not be included? And then some other thoughts. Major League Baseball. And I'm just saying, I feel like the women's boxing is suffering because if we've been watching boxing, there's a certain story to each round. There's a way that a fight unfolds, and it just seems like, obviously, if we take away 60 seconds, how do women build to a KO? Fatigue is not coming into play. How do it takes time to, I was saying earlier, Spence is a fighter who gets his knockouts, but it's from working the body, and it's from working the body over the course of time. Now, of course, he took care of Ocampo last time out because Ocampo was a lower level fighter who happened to be in that mandatory position. But for the most part, when he's fought world-class guys, Brook, Lamont Peterson, his body punching came into effect over the course of 7 or 8 rounds, longer for the Brook fight. But with the women's side, like if they only have 2 minutes to work, how do you set up that body attack? I mean, it takes time to, and it takes time for the fighters to have the skills to do that. Like Claressa Shields was just saying, she's just picking up some, the last 2 camps with John David Jackson, she's just made some adjustments to her style of fighting, her pace of fighting, to make the transition from the amateur game to the pros. But again, if you take this, what could transpire over the course of 180 seconds, condense that down to 120 seconds, then what drama are we losing? What's the fallout in the types of action that we see? Especially with a bunch of fighters, with a group of fighters who just have demonstrated that very few have one-punch power. So one thought that I was looking at, though, was if you took Major League Baseball down, every year they say the season is too long, but they haven't been able to agree on what they should change it to. And I think one strong thing behind it, if you took 162 games and condensed, now I know this is actual games versus the 2 minutes. Maybe I should be saying 9 innings if they took it to 6 innings. But just bear with me here. But if you took that 162 games down and made it to 142, baseball when would we see a 50-game home run season? When would we see a high 40, 45 and above home run season? That would hurt the appeal of the game. We don't have these guys sitting up here. I mean, nobody's really getting up to the 60s anymore in Major League Baseball. Kind of high 20s is the new 40s now, just with the steroids and the performance enhancement drugs coming out of the sport. It's not as many guys, it seems, that are jumping up to the 40s. But I'm just saying, how many years would it take for fans to reset to understand that, a 38 home run season in a 142 game season is great. That's awesome. We would lose that historical context on what's a standout performance, what's elite. Also, if you took 162 games and condensed it down to 142 games, would there be any 20-game winners on the pitching side? We wouldn't know how to You know, you wouldn't be able to sell, you know, a Cy Young winner who's winning 13 games. You would look at that like nothing. So, like I said, maybe that's not the best analogy, the best comparison, but I'm just saying, I think when we look at it being entertaining, I mean, first, obviously, like I said, if there's data that supports 2 minutes being the best time limit for women, I'm all for it. The safety of the athlete is paramount. But if that's not there, and there's a chance to make this the sport more entertaining, more competitive, and to for us to see what we're looking to see in sports. I mean, the knockdowns, fighters getting hurt, that's a big part of the appeal and, you know, the attraction of boxing. So when that's not there, like I said, if it's not gonna hurt the athletes, you know, wouldn't it be smart? Wouldn't it be a way to grow the sport? And another thing, you know, if you have more women training, getting better training, like I said, those club fights, when a fighter starting out is knocking out, gets those couple of knockouts on their record, but you're fighting a girl from some gym and she's been training for like 2 months in the sport, you know, didn't come through through an amateur program, and but she just goes in there and gets knocked out. But once we get this smaller percentage of females who actually are coming through an amateur program and fighting at younger ages, now you put them together, and we don't see that we're not seeing fighters get hurt. We're not seeing the knockouts. So, you know, it's kind of hard to expect the game to really grow if the key aspects of the game just aren't there as a function of the rules not allowing them to be there. So, like I said, again, for me, these are just some things that I'm sitting here thinking about. Like, is there an argument for, you know, that third minute? And like I said, I talked to Claressa Shields directly, asked her about that, and without any hesitation, she said she didn't care about the third minute. She's not an advocate of that. She doesn't have a problem with that. She could care less. So, you know, if, quote unquote, if the face of women's boxing isn't a big advocate for it, you know, then what am I sitting here talking about it for? What is Brian Kenny and Sergio Mora talking about it for? But like I said, you'd be a fool to think that the girl doesn't hit hard, because you saw how quickly Hannah's face got red last night. You saw her get wobbled a couple times. You saw her spirit, you know, her fighting spirit. You saw it be changed with a couple of shots that she was hit with. So, and then I guess that's just my final point. You know, it's just interesting this week as I check out some of the different podcasts that I check out and listen to. It'll be interesting to see what's the perspective. I mean, what's this perception of you know, whether or not anybody's giving her credit. You know, Claressa Shields credit. I think a lot of people tend to overlook her ability in the ring just because they don't like her attitude or her persona. But, you know, again, T-Rex addressed that last night on what the differences are between cocky and confident, boastful male fighters versus when we see a female that's doing it for some people. But, hey, look, man, I'm going to get ready to get out of here. It's football Sunday. I got some work waiting upstairs for me. Be on the lookout for the Bite Down podcast. I mean, the Bite Down Boxing podcast that'll be coming up later in the week. Check out the website, bitedownboxing.com. Please subscribe to the channel. Hopefully you understand the vibe that I'm bringing, the flavor that I'm bringing with my boxing talk versus some of the other stuff that's out there, and maybe that appeals to you. And so hopefully you come back here and kick it with me, R.L. Woodson, and that's about that. Like I end everything, you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. And enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And, you know, I'm out. 1.